Okay. Hello, everyone. I would like to have your attention now, people in the room and also people that are online. I see this was a very fruitful discussion. It was more than 20 minutes, as you might have noticed, because there was really a requirement for that. So now at this stage, we thought it would be very fruitful to now share some of the insights that you developed for these three scenarios during your discussion. So Tanya there has a microphone, and we will start with the room here, and then we will also invite people that are online to share their thoughts. And we might start this with the scenario number one. Yeah, with the childcare subsidies. So who wants to volunteer to share a little bit of what you discussed and what you found out? And then after you will share your thoughts, then also other people here and also virtually are welcome to maybe have some additional questions or some discussion also related to their scenarios. So yeah. The group number one.
Yes. Okay. Hi again to everyone, either in the room or via online participation. With regards to scenario number one and the social services automation of childcare subsidized, okay, this. The first aspect is to identify the exact stages that the bias can occur on on the creation of such an automated system in order to support the social workers on their activities. As mentioned, also in the presentations that we had before, the bias in such systems, the bias in such systems is a multidimensional aspect and can be identified in all the stages of policy-making procedure and in the implementation of such a system, of such an automated system. At first, we have the creation of the protocol on which the users should apply for the data. If we miss a specific guideline in this protocol and the different data that we asked from the citizens to apply or to ingest into the system, then there will be a specific bias, maybe with regards to ethnicity, with regards to their economical status. So at first, we have to frame very well the protocol that will govern the overall collection and generation of the data and fed of the data to the system. Then, moving from the protocol, this protocol should communicate it from the social workers, from the policymakers to the end users, to the citizens, in order to apply very well their data and to fed the system with their data. So on this, we may lack of correct communication. We may lack of citizens that they do not have access to the information, they do not have access to the protocol. If we are speaking about citizens that they are living in the countryside, this may have bias and discrimination with regards to the citizens that are living in the cities and they have better access to the information with, in contrary to the citizens that are in the countryside. This has also been observed in during the recent years with regards to the COVID. The COVID information, the COVID protocol has not communicated very well to citizens that they lack of means of information, they lack of internet and all this stuff. Then moving in the development of the user interface and the automated system and the algorithm itself, we may lack on the selection of specific features, of specific attributes that these algorithms should take into account in order to perform the final results and the insights. So we are speaking also about selection and other sampling bias. And of course, with regards to the development phase, the model that will be utilized in order to provide the final results should be well explained and well established in order to fit this specific problem. A model that can be applied in financial problems or in other domains, in healthcare domain, cannot be applied very well also on this aspect. So we must carefully select the model, the algorithm that will be utilized in order to provide the final results. So to sum up, and of course, the final results should also be communicated correct and should also be translated and interpreted very well from either the policymakers or the public authorities or even the citizens. So the final results should be presented very well in correct visualizations. The visual analytics should be very well established in order to have the final results correctly translated and transferred to the community. So we have covered all different aspects, the whole pipeline, and this is an agile process. And in each step, we have to incorporate mitigation measures, correct steps in order to tackle the bias in each kind of step. So these are the stages. Let's move to the types.
Super, thank you, George. So starting from the communication of the initiative, ending to the very evaluation, as pointed out, we do have an agile procedure and situation. Now, in terms of, we have also identified the different segments, the different pillars that we need to take into account, which are the social service workers, the automated system, the data provided by the users, the very users, the interface, the algorithm, and the very historical data. So we should also keep this in mind, the different stakeholders that are in place. Now, in terms of the types of biases that we have identified that could slip in the system even before the very development of the system. So by the very communication of the system to the very evaluation of the system, we can identify that we have biases as pointed out by Georgia. We have the historical biases, we have the socioeconomic biases, we have the selection and the sample biases, we have the ethnic biases, the gender biases, the in-group and out-group biases, and the confirmation evaluation biases. Again, we have pretty much identified the different steps of this agile process as well as the stakeholders, and we have pointed out the different categories where we have also identified biases. I believe that I don't have any additional to say at this point for this this part. Then we can go to how the biases affect the users.
Yes, thank you. So starting from let's say from the communication, there's a possibility that people will not be able to apply if they do not have proper information or if they don't have the skills or the means to access the information. So first of all, they will not be able to apply. Second, they might be afraid that they will be rejected, so they're discouraged to apply, even though they might be eligible. Then they can be actually rejected if the system is biased. This can also affect them in a financial way because they will not get the money for their childcare. This can also cause like a disruption in social cohesion because if we're talking about migrants, for example, or other underrepresented groups, that they will not be able to access the subsidies, maybe they will have like they will be tense with the locals or with the, let's say, national citizens of this specific country, and this also affects the social integration of these people in the specific country. Also, in terms of policy making, it affects the policymakers, that they also use this information because they will not have proper information to make the evidence-informed policies that they will need. And also this will, let's say, favor certain groups instead of others. So policymaking will also be biased. And finally, in terms of social workers, as also users of this tool, maybe it will actually give them more workload than they had in the beginning, even though this tool is to make their workload less. They will also have issues of trust with this tool, since the results will be biased. And finally, they will get eventually many complaints from the citizens that will be rejected, even though they will be, for example, eligible. And this can cause like a distress to them, or it will affect their productivity, their mental health. So this can affect all the citizens, the social workers, and the policymakers, maybe more indirect, but yeah.
Great.
I think that's all for us.
Yeah. Thank you for this very systemic breakdown. It's like
So yes, so to sum up, it is crucial to have a better understanding on everything, on the whole procedure and the different processes that affect an outcome. On this aspect, of course, we need, as we see right now, the joint collaboration and effort from experts from all the fields, from the technological side, from public authorities, and also from social scientists. So this is one crucial thing that we should do. That's all
Great.
from our side.
Yes, thank you. So at this point, I would maybe like to welcome the people that are with us virtually. We noticed that you had a discussion. Maybe you would like to share what were you discussing? For which of the scenarios you went for? Do we have someone online who would volunteer and unmute themselves? Great. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I am Federico Marengo. I don't know if we are one of the groups. We selected the scenario number 3 concerning facial recognition, and well, we found that first of all we divided the stages as our previous colleague made. We divided into the development and the deployment of the algorithm or the facial recognition system. We found that in the training or in the development stage, we can find bias in the training datasets. Some population may be underrepresented, and because in general datasets are built with using faces of white population, so other groups may be underrepresented, and this in turn will have, as a consequence, will have different performance rates. So where the person that is being evaluated is from an underrepresented group, they might have a greater rate of error, which can have further consequences, in particular when it is used for law enforcement. Then we found historical bias. Datasets used to build the algorithm is based on datasets from the past, and it cannot refer present situation. This may be in particular where the population does not reflect correctly or in a somewhat correctly the population in which the algorithm is being used. We also found that there can be anchoring bias, because what would happen if the algorithm makes a false identification? Should the law enforcement officer rely on this identification or not? So we mentioned before that underrepresented population might be subject to high rates of errors. So well, in this case, we should pay more attention to this kind of bias. And finally, bias in the deployment of the facial recognition technology. We found that there might be automation bias, which is over reliance on on the results provided by the algorithm. So this is something that we can find in this scenario. Also, with the issue of the unbalanced datasets, the differences in performance. I mentioned it before, but since this is also in deployment, bias in the training dataset may lead to greater errors to different populations. So these differences in the rates of errors may affect, in particular, to vulnerable populations or underrepresented population, which usually are those who do not build the algorithm. And finally, the attribution of a specific type, categories, or features to individuals. And it can be some sort of confirmation bias, because when we attribute by default a specific behavior to a specific population, and then we have it confirmed either correctly or incorrectly by the algorithm, it can strengthen the confirmation bias, and this is also something we should put the attention to. I don't know if my colleagues want to make any other comments, but if they do not have any further comment, this is all these are all the biases we found in this scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federico. Would someone else like to add something? You can wait. No? Okay. Then thank you very much. And since we are already at scenario number 3, it actually might be now a good idea if scenario number 2 agrees to go to the scenario number 3, and the group that we have here also shares and maybe adds up a little bit to the discussion that we just heard. Hmm?
So scenario number 3 here. I will only add some notes. I will be short. So we identified 5 stages: the user prevention at the metro station, the algorithm development, the recognition of people, the results explanation, and the algorithm updates depending on the results. For each of these stages, we identified the cognitive bias, selection or historical bias, socioeconomic negativity, anchoring, and implicit bias, which can affect, of course, all users of the metro, with citizen, tourist, and so on. The police, who's also a user of the official records data. The metro workers and the company, private company workers who developed the algorithm. Yeah, I think that's all right from our perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Mm.
The types of users,
Yes.
let's say, that they will be affected by this kind of so we have identified a set of stakeholders.
Microphone, please. Microphone.
I'm sorry. We have identified the types of users, of stakeholders that will be affected in this scenario, plus the 4 different stages of the process where the bias is incorporated. Complementary to what the previous presenter detailed about this scenario.
Mm. Great, thank you. Is this all?
Yeah,
Did you want to add something?
If you have other questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then thank you very much, the group of the scenario number 3. And now the microphone is moving to the group from the scenario number 2. Who is going to this? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for waiting a little bit. It made sense to go with the flow of the scenario number 3, and I hope that's okay with you. And please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So scenario number 2 is a scenario that tries to develop this recommender system and tries to figure out which users are using the new web pages. And based on the classification into seniors, adults with young kids, or teenagers, tries to do a recommendation of specific pages and specific content in order for the public to be more happy than today. So we tackled this from, we tried to understand it from different stages point of view. So maybe I should okay. And we started first about understanding the design development of such a system, and figure out that first of all, you have to, when you have your pages, you have your content, you have to understand, or you have to define whether specific content, specific information is for something either for kids, for elderlies, or whoever. You can do this by hand, you can do this by using AI, whatever, but at the end, you can have we identified 2 main biases here, definitely age bias and possibly gender bias, that can be kind of leading the design and development of the system. The second thing you need to do is to define the parameters that you will follow on each of the specific use. These are in worldwide well developed, Google Analytics and whatever, you know that going onto a specific web page, the system gathers more than 200 parameters from your browsing. But obviously from these different parameters, you have to choose the ones that you really want, that will be usable for your scenario. And obviously here you can come to the problem of something we said would be a cultural bias or maybe ethnicity or something like that, because obviously you would profile users in different regions probably differently, you know, Chinese, US, EU, or whoever. And you can have here your prejudice, culture prejudice, what is important for you, which parameters are here, could be relevant. This is what we figure out in design. When you finish with the design, then you go into the training. Now you have training periods. You've designed the system and said, look, I'll run this training for 2 months or 6 months, whatever, and gather all the data. And now, obviously, you can have here many problems. First is the presentation bias, because you don't know who's actually accessing the data, the web pages. You have to have some proper representation of all these different classes that you want to follow, but you don't know actually that. That can be an age bias, again, when you're looking specific data, whether they are linked to the age seniors and adults or whatever. Gender bias again. And then you have to, within this training phase, you have to also clean the data. When you get all the data, you can have different data which are wrong data, outliers. Maybe somebody just took there and clicked on some stuff to have problems, to make you a problem or whatever. Important thing is something, sentiment bias. People are browsing specific pages not only because they're interested, but maybe because they are not interested or they hate things. So this is something you don't know actually how to handle, so you have to figure it out. But if you figure it out, then you go to the models, you train the data, everything, and then go to the use. And then obviously you have, we identify two different stuff. One is classification bias. This is more linked to the algorithms. I don't know whether this is bias or maybe linked to the accuracy of the whole system in classifying different users in these 4 classes. And then obviously when you propose specific content, you can miss or propose a good or bad content. And we identified here something we called reinforcement. We have not been, these are too many biases here. we didn't have the list so we kind of figured it out by ourselves. So reinforcement, something which is called insight. We saw insight bias. So when you have this thing, then reinforce your impression that the system is doing well or not, although you don't really know about it. These are the concept. Maybe just for the end, I think maybe this could be interesting. The question is, what will be at the end the effect on users? And I think we have two options. If you've done it right, then you can have positive or negative effects. This is important. So positive effect could be that at the end, users are really getting the information and the content they really want. This is very positive. So if you've done it right, so classified correctly and based on classification, you propose the content. This is great. But there are also negative effects if you've done it right. Something we call information bubbles. So you go and then, feed the user specific content and you close them into these information bubbles. This could be a bad sign. Also, the privacy could be a big problem if you've done it right. On the other side, if you didn't do it right? So if you missed everything goes, then obviously the bad thing is that you propose bad pages, nobody cares, and you miss the whole things. And again, issues with privacy. So the privacy is an issue whether you've done it right or not. This is something we need to understand. So I think it's important that doing it right does not mean that also the results and effect will be good. They can be bad results. So this is all from our side. If anybody else would like to add from our team. That's it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Very valuable insights and also opinions and identification of the different types of bias. And I wanted to stress out especially the sentiment bias and the reinforcement bias that you mentioned. These are the type of integration and aggregation bias, because, for example, a specific group of people, let's say, wanted, for example, to click on news or to feed the algorithm with fake news, with propaganda and all this stuff in order to influence the citizens. So these kind of groups and personas, different personas, that they fed this recommendation system on purpose with bad news should be identified by the algorithm, by the system, and rejected at all. So this is one of the bias that the human integration and interaction with the system can influence it in a bad way, in a negative way.
Thank you. This was really brilliant. Thank you, everyone, very much for sharing your thoughts. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's okay. Just to kind of, I hope this was a good exercise for you to really understand the wideness of the dimensions where bias could occur and the systematic consequences that it might have. So, for the sake of the time now, we will have a short break, and we will start in 10 minutes. We have to, everyone needs a break, I think, after. Yes, exactly. No, it was very intense. So 4 minutes past, so 15:34, we continue, then with 34, yes. Yes, thank you. And I would also like to add, also for the sake of everyone to gather some information from this, I would like to ask the people that represented to share maybe just a couple of key findings of what they discussed over an email, and that then we can share this with everyone, so that it will be beneficial for everyone, because that's also to make it more impactful. Okay, then yes, one question there. Yes, we can also do that. Yeah, we will share the link to a common Google document. Yes. No, we had one breakout room online. Yeah.
So they were joined in one group.
Okay, coffee break.
Thank you. I don't know if it would be also useful to present a brief feedback from each team. Not only the results of the analysis that we have, but also a small comment, a small feedback of how this approach, this analysis influence you, and to have a better understanding of the procedures, of the different types of bias, of the aspects, because also here in the room, but also, yeah, I know, but also in online, we have people from different public authorities, from different private organizations, people that are inside the project but outside of the project. So it will be a good to have small feedback, small mentions about how this can have impact you.
So maybe if I can, after the short break, I propose to just go on with we have 3 more presentations, Mr. Samozorts, Jasmina Plosteiner, and another one from our project, so on regulation. So Federico is online. So, and after these 3 presentations, we still have some time for discussion, and we can maybe devote it to the subject that was mentioned now, so to share more experience. Okay?
Great.
If you agree.